Hi everyone. So Jeremy Corbyn did his alternative McTaggart speech a few days ago. McTaggart, that's a proper Scottish name, that is. It was much anticipated with regards to his ideas going forward of how the media should be operating in the 21st century in the UK, and some ideas going forward for the BBC and how to reform the BBC and how to bring the BBC up to date in the 21st century in the digital age. So I'm just going to quickly go to the video now. I've cut some segments out of how he started the lecture off, what he said these ideas were, and then just right at the very end there was a Q&A, and I've just copied one or two questions in from that I think you're going to enjoy. So this is, basically the important bits of how he started the speech.
So my message today is, for all the brilliant work done across the multiple outlets and platforms, the British media isn't ready for the challenges of the 21st century, and so cannot properly serve the interests of a truly democratic society. We need to accept some home truths about our media. While we do produce some fantastic drama, entertainment, documentaries and films, when it comes to news and current affairs, which are so absolutely vital and essential for a democratic society, I believe our media in many cases is failing.
Okay, so just want to cut in there. He's talking about the BBC there, and I know he's talking about the BBC because this is something that I've said about the BBC constantly on this channel. In the BBC's charter, it gives them three things that they are supposed to do for the British public. They are supposed to educate, they are supposed to entertain, and they are supposed to inform. And as I've said before, with regards to education, there are documentaries with Brian Cox and David Attenborough and some of their better investigative reports from people like Louis Theroux and Stacey Dooley. They're really good, excellent stuff. With regards to entertaining, their sports coverage of the Olympics or the World Cup is just second to none in the world. Nobody does it better than the BBC. You try and watch the Olympics or the World Cup on ESPN. It's almost impossible. There's an ad break every 45 seconds. So I'm glad he brought that up. It's the informing part that the BBC especially fall down on. And I'm glad he made that point, because I've been making it for quite some time on this channel.
Now, this isn't just the view of someone who's had, shall we say, an interesting relationship with the media, particularly over the last 3 years. The latest statistics from the European Broadcasting Union show that the British people simply don't trust the media. Trust in British TV news is below the EU average, and it is more distrusted than its German, Swedish or Belgian counterparts.
That's a shocking statistic, that is, if you think about it, especially when there was a poll that came out, I think it was 2 weeks ago, where the BBC was actually top of the trustworthiness rating. I think it was in the top 2 of the most trustworthy outlets, according to people in America. So people in America think the BBC are trustworthy. They think everything the BBC does is fantastic. People like me, on the other hand, in the UK, and obviously a lot of the UK, don't believe a bloody word they say. And if they say anything is true, you have to go and verify it before you believe it. To be below most of the countries in Europe in the trustworthiness rating, it's a shocking statistic, and it does show just how bad the media are in this country.
At least our TV news operates under some basic rules, ensuring an element of balance. We felt this very keenly during the general election campaign last year, when additional election rules on political balance kicked in. Broadcasters were required to report the Labour Party in our own voice, almost in many cases for the first time in 2 years, so we could properly lay out our policies for the country. It turned out, to the surprise of much of the media, that our ideas are pretty much the common sense mainstream, and it was the establishment gatekeepers who were shown to be well out of touch.
Again, that's a point that I've made many times on this channel over the last 6 or 7 months. Jeremy Corbyn was, I think it was 19 or 20 points behind Theresa May in the polls when the snap election was called last year. That's how far he was behind. That's why they called the snap election, because they thought they could get an even larger majority going into the Brexit negotiations. What they didn't count on, though, is the fact that we have broadcasting laws in the UK for the 6 weeks or 8 weeks it is before any election, and the broadcasters, particularly obviously the TV I'm talking here, gutter press and the newspapers. It's a different kettle of fish. They'll just do what they want. But the broadcast, the TV, they have to report, as he said there, in his own words, and Labour in their own words. And for the first time, instead of people hearing in the country the latest smear on Jeremy Corbyn, the latest, accusations of anti-Semitism, or the latest accusations of him being a communist or a Russian spy or Czech spy, whatever it is, instead of hearing those slurs and smears, all of a sudden they had to, for the first time, as he said, in many cases, they heard his ideas and his platform. And as I've said many times, people like what he stands for. People like his ideas. All they've got to do is just hear them. And this is why the media smear him as badly as they do, because the last thing they want is for people to hear what he's talking about and hear what he wants and hear his ideas, because they're overwhelmingly common sense.
So today, I want to make some suggestions for how we can build a free and democratic media in the digital age. I'll put forward 4 big proposals, which I hope will generate debate. This lecture is designed to encourage public debate, and judging by this morning's headlines, it's already working.
Yeah, there has been a lot of headlines since then, some of them absolute nonsense. I just want to stop it there, though, because coming up now is the Q&A at the end, and it's the first question of the Q&A I want to show, because it was from the Daily Mail. Just listen to this.
These ideas have at their heart.
It's coming after this. Let me show you this first.
The desire to create a media where journalists and media workers are set free from elite control, whether the billionaire class or government, that's holding them back from producing their very best work. These suggestions are not yet Labour Party policy, as they're still in the process of development. But I hope they show that we're thinking about major change and opening up space for more research and discussion, and we look forward to that research, that discussion, and that debate.
Yeah, it's important to note these are not policies that he's talking about. Here comes the Q&A now I was talking about. This is from the Daily Mail.
I'm going to go with the lady here in the stripy. Lady, woman.
Hi, Catherine Rushton from the Daily Mail. A cynic might say that your proposals to dismantle traditional newspapers as we know them could be an act of retaliation over the way that they've shone a light on anti-Semitism within the Labour Party.
A cynic might say, she said. In other words, that's how we're going to report this.
And more recently exposed your involvement in that wreath-laying ceremony. What's your response to that?
Well, I'll simply say this. I want us to have a strong and vibrant democracy, and I support journalists who want us to have a strong and vibrant democracy. This isn't about any retribution or retaliation to anybody. I've spent my life fighting racism. I spend my life opposing any form of racism. I spend my life opposing anti-Semitism in any form. And that is exactly what my party is determined to achieve. We will drive anti-Semitism out of our society and out of any of our political parties. And I'm absolutely committed and determined to achieve a non-racist society in Britain. I'm proud to live in a country that's multilingual, multi-faith and diverse. And that's how I want it always to be. Thank you for your question.
The next question comes from another journalist, and just listen to what she says before the question. It's gold, this is. It really is.
I'm just going to go a bit. I'm just going to go further back. There's somebody right at the back. Lady there with the glasses. Sorry.
Hi guys. First of all, as an immigrant, I want to say that the Daily Mail waxing anything about morality is ridiculous. So.
I love that. I just want to say, as an immigrant, the Daily Mail waxing anything about morality is ridiculous. I just had to put that in because I thought it was brilliant. So this came out actually before the lecture, this did, and when I was watching the lecture, I was writing everything down, and as it turns out, it's basically these 10 things that he was suggesting were the way forward for the media in this country. And number one there, it says, replace some Tory-appointed BBC board members with members elected by the BBC staff and licence payers. This is a brilliant idea, and to be quite honest, it's something that should have happened right from the very beginning of the BBC. Right from the very start. How you can expect the BBC to be independent of the government in this country and to hold the government accountable when the government are the very people who are putting the board members on the board of the BBC is just it's astounding. Is it any wonder, MI6 were vetting the BBC up until the 1990s? Some say they still are. I'm not 100% sure of that, but that's a brilliant idea, and especially the bit elected by the BBC staff and licence payers. It's a great idea, that is, and I've got a good feeling about that. I think that will happen. I think it certainly will happen if he becomes Prime Minister. Number two there, cut BBC licence fee for poor households. Anybody who knows anything about me personally will know I have a bit of a bugbear about that. The poorer households, especially having to pay the TV licence. There's no discount for them or anything like that. It's £152 now. And obviously the people who don't pay the TV licence are the poor people. They're the people who can't afford it. They just can't afford it. That's the problem. It's not that they don't, or they won't, or they just can't out of principle, or won't out of principle. It's the fact that they can't afford it. So these are the people that end up in court. These are the people that end up with a £400 plus fine. It's usually a minimum £400 that these people are fined. So not only have they got £152 debt or whatever it is that they can't pay in the first place, it's then quadrupled. That makes no sense whatsoever. What does make sense is to say, right, okay, until your household reaches a certain threshold of income, you don't have to pay the full TV licence, and then below that, whatever your income is, it's scaled, and obviously anybody on minimum wage, they're exempt from paying the TV licence. So it's on a sort of a rolling basis. It builds up and builds up and builds up, and then once your household hits a threshold, then you should pay the full TV licence. Brilliant idea. In my opinion, when it comes to the poorer households in this country, the TV licence fee isn't a licence fee at all. It's a tax on poverty. That's what it is, because they can't pay it. Number 3, it says, introduction of a digital licence fee payable by tech giants to contribute to the BBC budget. Some people have said that this digital licence fee is the setting up of the British Digital Corporation. I'm not sure whether that will work, but something has to be done about it because the BBC is really lagging behind here. I mean, their answer to getting people to pay the TV licence who watched online was to say, hey, if you have to log in now. Really? Well, people are just going to make up a different account, aren't they? There's no way of tracking them. You can't track them by law, the people that you log in. And so something has to be done for that. I really would like to see that more detail on it, because I haven't seen enough detail on that to check whether it's a good or a bad thing. something has to be done though to drag the BBC into the 21st century. And then it's got number 4, end renewal of the BBC Charter and put BBC funding on a more stable footing. Anybody who's spent any time watching my channel when I'm talking about the BBC will know the BBC Charter is a frigging joke. It really is. It's a joke. You read the first page of the British Charter, the headline is hilarious for a start. It says, Queen Elizabeth of the Commonwealth, blah, 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 of this, of that, of the other. It's like she's been introduced as, a character from Game of Thrones, Breaker of Chains, Mother of Dragons. And then on the next page, the Charter starts. And within the first half of a page, you start laughing because the BBC Charter is there. And I started laughing when I saw it because I thought they're in breach of this Charter every single day they're on air. It's a joke. Just scrap it. Put it on a more stable footing. Just scrap this Charter. It's just bull. It really is. Number 5, then it says that he proposed new transparency regulation on the pay and diversity of the BBC workforce. This confused the crap out of me. I think that already happened. At least, that was my my take of it. I thought that was already in place. If he's actually really saying new transparency regulation to really broaden it and to, then I understand it. But I think that's already in place, to be honest. Number 6, expand the BBC scheme to fund and develop local journalism. This is a brilliant idea. At the beginning of that lecture, he was talking about the concentration of the people who own the media in this country. There's was it four companies own the vast majority, like 75% of the media in this country, of the national media and of the local media. The concentration is in an even smaller number of hands, I believe. I might have got that wrong way around there. So that to fund and develop local journalism, the BBC scheme, that's a really, really excellent idea, and I thoroughly support that. A new fund for independent journalism paid for by a tax on tech giants. I believe this is something that they already do in France and Belgium. And he did mention that in that lecture as well. He mentioned that France and Belgium already do this. So I'd have to really research how it's done. But again, these tech giants, they get away with paying absolutely minimal tax on the profits that they make in this country. Facebook, Google, Amazon, they all get away with any multinational global corporation will take advantage of every single tax loophole they possibly can to pay less tax in the UK, and they do. Google have said, listen, we'd pay more tax if we had to, but because of your rules, we don't have to, so we don't. That's what Google has said. So taxing them in a different way to directly fund independent journalism, that's a great idea. Giving charitable status to some local investigative and public interest journalism is a brilliant idea as well. This is something that, charitable status, this is something that people could fund. The people could fund the journalism. One of the things I love about what I do is I'm funded by you, I'm answerable to you. When you sort of have that responsibility, it really does make you want to put out your best work, because the people who are funding you are the people who are going to be reading or watching what you do. Again, great idea. Number 9, strengthen freedom of information journalism by ending the ministerial vetoes over freedom of information requests. I've got to be honest here, I didn't know up until that the MPs could veto it. I didn't know that. I didn't know the MPs could veto a freedom of information request. So I totally agree with that. And then number 10 is sort of an expansion on that. Extend the Freedom of Information Act legislation to include private companies who receive taxpayers' money. This is I couldn't believe again that this wasn't done. I mean, when you look at the disasters just in the last few months with Carillion, who were funded by taxpayers' money and through the government, and then these private prisons again funded by the government, and that prison in Birmingham basically being, you've got guards locking themselves in because they're scared of, the prisoners are running the jail. So obviously, freedom of information legislation expanded to these private companies who actually receive taxpayers' money. That again is a brilliant idea. So overall, this is a good thing that they are suggesting. It's good that they're making the public aware and saying, hey, let's talk about these. And as you said, let's talk about them. There's two things that I was really quite disappointed that he didn't bring up in that hour-long lecture. There's two things that I was really quite disappointed. First of all, I was really disappointed that he didn't highlight just how these tech giants, the social media companies are silencing independent media right now. I'm really, really deflated that he didn't say anything about that. He didn't even mention it. He didn't touch on it. He must know that this is going on. He must know. He must know that independent journalists, and it's not just on the left and it's not just on the right, no matter what Alex Jones will try and tell you, it's any anti-establishment, anti-war voices. That's what it is. So I'm really, really I'm not upset. I'm disappointed that he didn't even touch on that. And most of all, I am pissed off with him. Excuse me. I'm coughing halfway through that. I'm pissed off with him that he didn't mention the persecution of the most famous journalist on the planet right now, Julian Assange. I'm really disappointed that he didn't mention that in this hour-long speech at all. And he's been silent on Julian Assange now for years after we know that he's supportive of Julian Assange. And this is my criticism of Jeremy Corbyn every single time. It comes down to the same thing I'm criticising him for. He's not radical enough for me. Everybody in America, everybody thinks he's far left lunatic. He's not radical enough. I really wish he would have the courage of his convictions to say what he means and mean what he says, instead of being cautious because he knows how the media will give me a tough time. Well, guess what, Corbyn? The media are going to give you a tough time no matter what you say. If you don't say something about Julian Assange, the headlines are going to be saying, hey, you're an anti-Semite anyway. So give him some respite from the anti-Semite sphere and give him a new thing. I just really wish he would come out. I know he supports Julian Assange. He's been on record, I think it was about 5 years ago now. He's on record as saying he shouldn't be persecuted in this way. So why doesn't he have his courage of his convictions and actually come out and say it? And it's the same with the marijuana legislation. He knows that it should be legal. He knows that it should be taxed and regulated and legalized. He knows that. He knows it's the smart way forward. He's seen what's happening in other countries. But what did they do in their manifesto? Oh, we support it for medical use. It's not far enough. I just wish he would have the courage of his convictions to really come out and give his views on things. Having said all that, having criticised him at the end there, everything that he said there in that lecture was really good. And it was really exciting for independent media outlet like me, thinking that, hey, maybe there's a chance that outlets like mine are going to be able to play on a level playing field with some of these bigger outlets that have got a monopoly on things at the moment. That's the way I saw it. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. Again, I'll link to the longer video down below if you want to watch it. As a score out of 10, I think I'd give him 8. 8 out of 10 for it. I just wish he'd mentioned how independent voices are being silenced by these big tech companies that he mentioned 3 or 4 times in that lecture. And I really, really wish he had mentioned the persecution of Julian Assange, which is just despicable as far as I'm concerned. If you like this video and you want to hear more, please click subscribe and click the bell down there as well so you get a notification of when I drop further videos. Otherwise, YouTube will hide it from you. Any future videos, they have admitted that they do that. We are facing an absolute onslaught, a barrage from both the corporate media and corporations who are trying to silence our voices. They're trying to stop us from bringing you the truth and cutting through the partisan BS that you get in the mainstream media. They don't like it. We're their competition. So if you can support channels like mine, please do so. Please share the videos wherever you can. Talk to your friends and family and spread the word about what we're doing. If you can support us on Patreon, please do so as well. The link is down there. You can support me for as little as $1 a month, and every bit helps. We cannot do this without your support. Thanks very much for your support. Until next time, peace and take care.